Welcome back to the Future Archive. Today, we examine archived broadcasts from August 3, 2026, a day when humanity demonstrated its usual flair for the dramatic. We'll cover a mysterious and deadly outbreak, an escalation in conflict, economic tensions in the Middle East, climate-induced disruptions in Europe, and a rare glimpse of a detained leader. Let's begin. The first story. Deadly gastrointestinal outbreak baffles U.S. health officials. In August 2026, the United States reported its first 2 deaths linked to a bizarre and rapidly spreading gastrointestinal outbreak. The condition, dubbed explosive diarrhea by the media, left scientists and health officials scrambling for answers. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, confirmed cases in multiple states with symptoms so severe that hospital emergency rooms were overwhelmed. Initial reports suggested the outbreak may have been foodborne, but the exact source remained unidentified. Public panic grew as misinformation spread online, with some blaming contaminated water supplies, while others speculated about bioterrorism. The CDC issued urgent guidance on hygiene and containment, but the lack of clear answers only deepened the anxiety. This outbreak revealed much about 2026 society, its vulnerability to misinformation, its reliance on overstretched public health systems, and its tendency to assume the worst in the absence of facts. From the perspective of 2050, we now know this was an early warning sign of the vulnerabilities in global food supply chains, which would later be exploited by both state and non-state actors. The incident also underscored humanity's favorite strategy, reacting after the fact rather than preparing in advance. Evidence later suggested an intern at a major food distributor may have mislabeled a shipment, but this was never confirmed. Some problems cannot be contained by hand sanitizer alone. The second story. Russian beach drone strike kills 7, injures 40. On August 3, 2026, Russia reported that a Ukrainian drone strike hit a crowded beach in the occupied region of Crimea, killing 7 civilians and injuring 40 others. The attack occurred during peak summer hours, when families and tourists were present. Russia swiftly blamed Ukraine, calling the strike a deliberate act of terrorism, while Ukraine denied responsibility, suggesting the drone may have been misdirected or malfunctioned. The incident drew international condemnation, with the United Nations calling for restraint and an immediate investigation. The strike marked a significant escalation in the ongoing conflict, as civilian targets became increasingly difficult to avoid in the drone warfare era. This event highlighted the blurring lines between military and civilian spaces in modern warfare. By 2026, drone technology had democratized the ability to strike from a distance, reducing the cost of conflict but increasing its unpredictability. From 2050's vantage point, this strike was one of many that forced the international community to finally address the lack of clear rules governing autonomous weapons. Of course, by then, the AI safety committees had already become largely ceremonial, as the technology outpaced the regulations. The incident also underscored how easily geopolitical tensions could spiral when accountability was unclear. War had become cheaper, but not less messy. The third story. Middle East oil shipping routes face greatest threat since Iran war. Analysts in 2026 warned that threats to oil tankers in the Middle East had reached their highest level since the start of the Iran war. Tensions in the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea disrupted global oil shipping routes, with multiple tankers reporting near misses from drones, mines, and other attacks. The economic implications were immediate. Oil prices surged, and insurance costs for shipping through the region skyrocketed. The United States and its allies considered military escorts for commercial vessels, while Iran denied involvement, blaming uncontrolled elements for the instability. The crisis strained an already fragile global economy, still recovering from the pandemic and now facing new supply chain disruptions. This moment was a textbook example of how geopolitical tensions could ripple through the global economy. The Middle East had long been a powder keg, but by 2026, the tools of disruption had become more accessible and harder to trace. From 2050, We see this as a turning point in the Great Subsidization, as nations began heavily subsidizing alternative energy sources to reduce dependence on unstable regions. Ironically, the economic fallout from these disruptions accelerated the adoption of AI-driven logistics, which by 2050 had become humanity's employer in more ways than one. The world learned once again that oil and water do not mix well with drones. The fourth story. Rhine River hits record low levels amid European drought. In the summer of 2026, the Rhine River, a critical artery for European trade and agriculture, fell to record low levels due to a severe and prolonged drought. The river, which had already seen declining water levels in previous years, became nearly unnavigable for large cargo ships, disrupting supply chains that relied on its route. Germany and other European nations debated emergency measures, including dredging and water rationing, as temperatures continued to rise. Farmers along the riverbanks reported significant crop losses, while industries dependent on river transport faced delays and increased costs. The drought was part of a broader pattern of extreme weather events linked to climate change, which were becoming impossible to ignore. The Rhine's drought was a stark reminder that nature does not adhere to human timelines or political convenience. By 2026, climate change was no longer a distant threat, but a present reality, forcing governments to confront the inadequacy of their preparations. From 2050's perspective, this event was one of many that pushed Europe toward more aggressive climate adaptation policies, though, as ever, these were implemented only after the damage was done. The Great Spreadsheet Crisis of 2027 would later reveal just how poorly these measures had been tracked. Europe discovered that rivers, like deadlines, cannot be negotiated with. The fifth story. Aung San Suu Kyi appears in good health after 2.5 years in isolation. After 2.5 years of near-total isolation, Aung San Suu Kyi, the detained leader of Myanmar, was seen in a brief video call with her legal team. The footage, the first confirmed outside contact since her imprisonment following the 2021 military coup, showed her appearing healthy and composed. Suu Kyi had been held in an undisclosed location, with her supporters and international observers raising concerns about her treatment and access to medical care. The rare glimpse offered a moment of relief to her supporters, though her continued detention underscored the military junta's unwillingness to cede power. The United Nations and several human rights organizations reiterated calls for her release. This moment was rich in irony. Suu Kyi, a symbol of democratic resistance, had spent decades fighting for freedom, only to end up imprisoned by the very forces she once opposed. Her appearance in good health was both a relief and a reminder of the junta's calculated control over her image. From 2050, we view this as part of a broader pattern in the 2020s, where authoritarian regimes became increasingly adept at managing perceptions while suppressing dissent. It also highlighted the international community's limited leverage in such cases, as economic and diplomatic tools often proved blunt or ineffective. Even in detention, she remained a living rebuke to her captors. August 3, 2026 was a day of contrasts: death and survival, conflict and resilience, drought and endurance. It was a snapshot of a world struggling to adapt to changes it had long foreseen but failed to prepare for. As we've seen, some problems were addressed, others were postponed, and a few were simply ignored until they became unavoidable. This has been the Future Archive. The past, as always, is not going anywhere.